centuries. At the center of a vast empire that at its peak reigned over parts of Thailand, Vietnam, and Laos, glistened a magnificent capital, Angkor. We are about to take a trip through Cambodia, navigating on the Mekong and its tributaries, the Tonle Sap and the Basak rivers. Day after day we'll be attempting to follow the history of the people that founded a dazzling civilization, the Khmer. Jayavarman II, the founder of Angkor, who gave himself the title of Devaraja, God King, claimed dominion over a territory that included Champa and the land of cardamom and mangoes, probably Siam, and extended to the ocean and into China. We're at the beginning of the 9th century, and the Khmer Empire is already very powerful. Jayavarman II and all his successors will build a vast capital, a unique city covering over 400 square kilometers and abounding with hundreds of temples, of which Angkor Wat remains to this day the finest symbol. Conquered and sacked by the Siamese invaders in 1431, Angkor would disappear, abandoned to the encroaching forest. And so the Khmer capital remains forgotten in the heart of the jungle for more than 400 years. It is not until 1860 that the Frenchman Henri Mouhot rediscovers the lost city and the temples entrapped by the giant roots of the kapok trees.
We took an entire day to explore this place, and we went from one marvel to another in an ever-increasing state of ecstasy. Ah, if only I were gifted with a pen of Chateaubriand, or of Lamartine, or with the paintbrush of Claude Lorrain, to impart to art lovers just how beautiful and grandiose are these perhaps unique ruins. The last remaining vestiges of a people that is no more, and whose very name, like that of the great men, artists, and sovereigns who made it famous, will most likely remain forever buried beneath the dust and rubble.
Luckily, since Henri Mouhot's voyage, the work of historians and archaeologists has allowed us to get a better idea just how the Khmer capital functioned.
The Khmer civilization, or its written history, began in the 6th century, in the field of religious architecture, in the field of religious art, and in the field of epigraphy as well. It was in the 9th century that the true, that is, the centralized Khmer Empire arose, at the very beginning of the 9th century, with the region of Angkor as its geographic center. What really allowed Angkor to emerge was the mastery of hydraulics, hydraulic installations, with the construction of what we call today barais, which are huge reservoirs. There are certain that measure 8 kilometers by 2. They are man-made artificial reservoirs. What were they used for? They certainly had a religious function, yes, but the main function of these reservoirs, these barais, was hydraulics, for agriculture.
The barais, like the one here at Angkor Wat, were used to capture water to irrigate the rice paddies. From a religious point of view, they represent the cosmic ocean that surrounds Mount Meru, the sacred mountain of Hindu mythology.
Angkor Wat could only have been designed by one single person. It's all very homogeneous. It's all very harmonious. If you would, Angkor Wat is classicism in its purest state.
According to the laws of Hindu cosmology, the central tower of the sanctuary, which is 60 meters high, represents Mount Meru, axis of the world and dwelling of the gods. Angkor Wat, which is the modern name, means capital monastery. In fact, King Suryavarman II, a practicing Hindu, had named it Vishnu Loka, that is, the world of Vishnu. But even apart from the name itself, the influence of India on Angkor Wat can be felt in even the slightest details.
On estime que grosso modo
we think that these waves, these first waves that spread Indian civilization, began more or less around the beginning of the Christian era. From the beginning of the Christian era up until the 6th century, as far as Cambodia is concerned. That is how Indian civilization really took root with the Cambodians, with the Cham and the Javanese. Now, are the Cambodians Indians? Of course not, because there is no Angkor Wat in India. But then, again, without India, Angkor Wat would never have come into existence.
Angkor Thom, the great capital founded by King Jayavarman VII, was constructed only a few decades after Angkor Wat. But in that interval, the architectural style had evolved a great deal. Carrying the body of a seven-headed Naga, which symbolizes the water spirits, a line of dozens of giant yakshas, deities of ancient India, lead to a monumental gate. Within the enclosure towers the most mysterious of all the temples of Angkor, Bayon Temple.
The Bayon Temple is quite the opposite of Angkor Wat. If you were to look at it from a different cultural context, you could say that Bayon Temple is romanticism. In a certain sense, it's more alive than Angkor Wat, since Bayon depicts scenes of everyday life.
The bas-reliefs of Bayon Temple also illustrate episodes of Khmer history. With the accuracy of naturalists, the sculptors have created tableaus depicting a wide variety of fish, flooded forests, and animals. A wealth of details that bring to mind the landscapes of Lake Tonle Sap. And it was there, a region close to Angkor, that King Jayavarman VII is said to have engaged in battle with the Cham enemy. Throughout its history, the Khmer Empire had adopted the religious influences of the times. Suryavarman II, the founder of Angkor Wat, was Hindu. But a few decades later, his successor, Jayavarman VII, converted to Buddhism and dedicated his main temple, the Bayon Temple, to his adopted religion. Many monks come on pilgrimages to this mountain of stone with its gigantic sculptures. But when they pray before these mysterious faces, whom are they honoring? Jayavarman VII or Buddha?
We don't really know the meaning of these faces. But what we do know is that there is the idea of omnipresence, because the faces in question are looking in the directions of the 4 cardinal points. These towers of faces here at Bayon continue to fascinate people because they still have an air of mystery surrounding them.
A few dozen kilometers south of Angkor, we enter into the world of Lake Tonle Sap. It's the low water season. The vast lake depicted on the bas-reliefs of Bayon Temple has receded several kilometers, leaving behind mangrove swamps. Only a few small muddy oxbow lakes are still open to navigation. In the months of May and June, the lake that Henri Mouot, the discoverer of Angkor, called the Little Mediterranean of Cambodia, shrinks from 10,000 square kilometers to just 3,000. Lake Tonle Sap plays a vital role in Cambodia's economy. In July, at the end of the dry season, the waters of the Mekong rise so drastically and exert such pressure that a remarkable phenomenon occurs. The current of the lake's river is reversed, and the waters back up towards their source rather than flowing naturally towards the sea. For several months, the lake is transformed into a vast fish-breeding pond, where an incredible variety of fish thrive. In October, the phenomenon reverses, and the fish once again head for the Mekong. It's the time of the miraculous drafts of fishes that the locals call the fish harvest. A few companies have set up business on the Tonle Sap. Due to a lack of modern means of conservation, they transform the fish that they buy from the local fishermen into praok, a fermented paste that's used all over Cambodia as a condiment. Most of the inhabitants live in floating villages that move according to the flooding of the lake. They're not all fishermen, but whether they're Cambodians or Vietnamese immigrants, their life on Tonle Sap is not exactly restful.
My name is Loy Hawk. I pilot small motorboats. It's my job. It's what I do. But I don't earn enough money to live off it. I raise fish as well. What I really should do is breed the fingerlings by myself. That way I could raise much more. And earn more. We'd have a better life. Without the fingerlings, it's impossible to make a profit selling fish. I earn just a few reals a day, barely enough to raise my children. It's not easy to live in this type of house. It has to be overhauled very often, every 2 or 3 years. Otherwise, it quickly becomes unlivable. But you've hardly finished when you have to start all over again. This sort of house gets run down very quickly. It's not like a house built on dry land. Here, there's always something that needs fixing. The children go to school by boat. When I can't take them, they go with the neighbors. We group together and take 4 or 5 children. We take turns bringing them to school, and it works the same way to bring them home. The house moves with us. When the current goes downstream, we all go down. When the water goes back upstream, we all go up.
An odor of dried fish permeates the village. It's praok. Loyok most likely produces his own, like all his neighbors. It's a simple process. After cutting the fish up into small pieces, they salt it and dry it in the sun. It's then put into an earthenware pot. Once it has fermented for a good while, the Cambodians' favorite condiment is ready to eat.
Life is hard on Tonle Sap, but I have no regrets. Sometimes we can't sleep on account of the wind. If we had a house on dry land, we would go live in it. Sometimes, when the wind blows in the evening, we have to get up because we're afraid that the house will break free from its moorings and go adrift. So we have to make sure that the moorings are fast. Yes, if we had land, we would definitely settle on it. You really have to be tough to live here.
The water level is so low that we can embark on the Tonle Pondao only at the exit of the lake. This small cruise boat, which will take us to Phnom Penh, is the only one navigating the rivers of Cambodia. For the moment, we're heading south, following the current of the Tonle Sap River in the direction of Kampong Chhnang. Even though the navigation is not dangerous, we have to have a Cambodian river pilot on board.
The most difficult time to navigate on the Tonle Sap or the Mekong is when the river is rising or dropping. The trickiest is during the months of May and June. You can't navigate everywhere in the period between May and June. We can't go up north in particular, and rarely beyond Kampong Chhnang.
During
that period, it's impossible to go to Siem Reap. During the rest of the year, we can navigate everywhere on the Tonle Sap, as well as on the Mekong. All we need is 4 meters of water under the hull, and we can go all the way to Siem Reap. But that's not the case right now. This is the low water season. There's really not enough water. Generally speaking, the Tonle Sap is a very narrow river. We encounter a lot of fishing boats. Sometimes there can be little accidents, collisions, but it's never really serious. When it does happen, the insurance companies pay for the repairs.
A little before sundown, the captain decides to tie up at a small village. For a little while, this unscheduled arrival attracts the curious villagers. But very quickly they resume their activities, and the village settles back into its usual calm. As soon as the sun sets over the river, cruise life takes over once again on the Tonle Pondao. We continue our route during the night, and at dawn we're anchored before the little town of Kampong Chhnang. In these early morning hours, all the town's activity is centered on the fish market on the banks of the river. The boats unload the catches they made during the night, and all around them the locals are buying, selling, bargaining, joking. A friendly ritual, and the women, with their head covered in the krama, the traditional checked scarf, take a very active part. Leaving the bustling market of Kampong Chhnang, we head up an arm of the river. Eventually, we come to a bamboo gate, which seems to mark the entry to a sort of interior lake. We're in a reserved fishing area. A fishing boss bought the rights to set up a permanent dai, a fish trap here. This dai, which stretches from one bank of the river to the other, is one of the largest in the whole region. It's a veritable dam measuring several hundred meters in length.
A dai is made up of 8 nets. Each one measures 100 meters by 20. It's mainly during the high water season that we catch fish. We've set up 3 dais across the river. The fish that follow the flood current up during the high water of Tonle Sap can't avoid it. With 3 dais, none of them get away. Every time we bring in the net, we get a ton of fish, 5 tons, sometimes up to 10 tons of fish. We sort them. The biggest ones are set aside for exportation. We try to sell the smaller ones right away locally. No one else is allowed to set up a dai as big as this one in this area.
As we leave Kampong Chhnang behind us, we see the fishermen setting up makeshift dais, stringing the nets between their boats anchored in the middle of the river. We continue our voyage on the Tonle Sap and head for our next stop, Kampong Cham. Thanks to the generosity of the river down through the centuries, fishing, even today, is still the main activity of the region. During the night, we left the Tonle Sap River. In the early morning, we're on the Mekong and approaching Kampong Cham, the bank of the Cham. By an irony of history, this bridge over the Mekong, financed by the Japanese, will make Kampong Cham, and thus Cambodia, the unavoidable link between Saigon and Bangkok, the capitals of the Khmer's 2 ancestral enemies, the Vietnamese and the Thais. The town of Kampong Cham, stretched out along the embankments of the Mekong, is a major trading center. When the country was a French protectorate, it exported, among other products, the balls of rubber produced at the Chup rubber plantation. During the tragic interlude of the Khmer Rouge, the region was devastated and plantations destroyed, and worst of all, the Cham minority was massacred. The city managed to live through it and is thriving once again. Now it's the capital of Cambodia's most densely populated region. Unlike Kampong Chhnang, whose whole economy revolves around fishing, Kampong Cham is more oriented towards agriculture. In addition to the colorful fruit that liven up the market stalls, They also raise cotton, tobacco, and of course, rice, which along with fish are the two staples of the Cambodian diet. Victims of the low water, the floating houses are almost beached on the Mekong riverbed. The fishermen don't use dyes in this region, but rather large cantilever nets that came from China. They rest suspended between heaven and earth like bamboo skeletons, awaiting the return of the floodwaters. The Cham, from whom the town gets its name, are Muslims. These are the descendants of the inhabitants of Champa. In the 12th century, the Vietnamese conquered this powerful maritime kingdom, which was the main enemy of the Khmer Empire. Many Cham, driven inland, away from the South China Sea, took refuge in Khmer territory. For close to 8 centuries, they lived there in peace, but then the Khmer Rouge took power in 1975. At the time, the Cham were the most numerous minority group in Cambodia. Pol Pot, suspicious of these Cambodians whose language he didn't understand, massacred them by the thousands. Now the Cambodian government is trying to win back their trust and is helping the Cham community to reconstruct their mosques. During the 12th century, there were frequent wars between the Khmer and the Cham. It's by driving out the Cham, who had seized control of Angkor for a time, that Jayavarman VII became the great sovereign, renowned as the founder of Angkor Thom and the Bayon temple. One of the first temples that he built outside of Angkor was the Wat Nokor. Located near the town of Kampong Chhnang and the Mekong, it undoubtedly represents a staging post on the route between the Khmer capital and the Champa kingdom that he had just conquered.
This temple was constructed under the reign of Jayavarman VII and predates the temples built by the king at Angkor. Nobody knows why the king decided to erect this temple here, when the site of Angkor existed already. We know only that this temple was constructed before. The ancients relate that it was because the land here was no longer good enough, that the king finally decided to return to Angkor and to construct new temples there.
We'll surely never know exactly why Jayavarman VII first took an interest in Wat Nokor and then abandoned it. Was it the whim of a prince? A determination to impose his presence on the court, which was a nest of intrigue? No matter. This ancient temple dedicated to the glory of Buddha is nonetheless a magnificent testimony to Khmer art. Ever since that time, Wat Nokor has always been active. Many pagodas have been built around the original temple. This one that houses the sanctuary, a very colorful Thai-style pagoda, is also dedicated to the life of Buddha. Like this Buddha, stretched out with his eyes closed, waiting for nirvana, the town of Kampong Chhnang, before the desperately low and calm waters of the Mekong, patiently awaits the return of the flood season. While they wait, they mend their nets. They prepare the gear. A huge bamboo bridge connects the two banks of the Mekong. Every year when the month of June arrives and before the floodwaters carry it away, the people of Kampong Chhnang dismantle the bridge until the following season. Once again, we've cast off, and we're back en route. The young Burmese captain is up on the bridge supervising the maneuvers.
And here we have three captains, Myanmar, Cambodian and Vietnamese. For me, my responsibility is Cambodia because of our engine is not the same type in Cambodian and Vietnam side. They haven't seen before this type of engine. So I'm coming to teach you Cambodian captain and Vietnam captain about how to drive, how to control the ship and how to take care about the ship. Vietnamese captain, he will take care about the Vietnam side. And then also Cambodian captain take care about the Cambodian side for the navigation. Here, Cambodian captain can speak Vietnamese and also just a little English. So we all three translation from the Cambodian captain. In Mekong River, we cannot go anywhere. Vietnamese side navigation is more easier than the Cambodian side because there are a lot of sandbank.
The water of the Mekong seems to have dropped again since the beginning of our cruise. For a few more months, the houses built on the riverbanks will be perched on the dry riverbed. Before arriving at Phnom Penh, the captain treats us to a surprise stop in the Khmer countryside. The peace and quiet that permeate this village could almost make you forget the years of terror that ravaged Cambodia during the dictatorship of the Khmer Rouge. The gentleness of the faces, the beauty of the smiles, there's nothing to disturb them. By hiding away the horror and the suffering of those blood-drenched years in the deepest part of their being, the Cambodians are not trying to forget them. They're just trying to live in peace. The Tonle Pondao slips gently along the waters of the Mekong. Our cruise on the rivers and waterways of Cambodia is not quite finished, but we can feel that everyone wants to make the most of these moments as if they were the last. A last moment of relaxation on the deck, a last gaze at the shores bathed in sunlight. In the morning, we're nearing Phnom Penh. Since the beginning of our voyage on Lake Tonle Sap, we've covered close to 600 kilometers on the lakes and rivers of Cambodia. A last vignette of traditional Cambodia. As we come into view of the capital, we pass a group of fishermen busy on their dyes. Apart from this stupa-shaped monument, symbolizing the founding of the city in 1494, and the Royal Palace, built in 1913, outlined against the sky here, Phnom Penh has really nothing to offer. Nothing to rival with the magnificence of Angkor, the ancient capital. The treasure of the city lies elsewhere, in its strategic position at the junction of Cambodia's four major rivers.
I think that originally the symbol of the city was the four arms. In French we say four arms, but in Cambodian we say four faces. These four faces represent the four faces of the world, of the cosmos. The levees, you see, were constructed for protection, for reasons of security, and to encircle the town, to keep the whole population inside. It is only with the arrival of the French in 1863 that they began to delocalize the centers of activity.
And in fact, apart from the Royal Palace, the finest monuments of Phnom Penh are the work of the French. This magnificent Art Deco building, constructed in 1937, still houses the city's central market. Other constructions have had a more sinister fate. In 1975, this former high school was transformed by the Khmer Rouge into a high-security prison, infamous under the name of S21. Within these walls, which now house a genocide museum, 20,000 Cambodians were tortured to death between 1975 and 1979. During the 4 years of Pol Pot's dictatorship, several million Cambodians met their death. Like all the other cities of Cambodia, Phnom Penh paid a heavy tribute to this destructive madness. On the 17th of April 1975, the Khmer Rouge entered the capital. In less than 48 hours, they had emptied the city of every single inhabitant. Now the Cambodians once again come to stroll along the banks of the Tonle Sap, where they buy birds to set free, a symbol of their own refound liberty, as if to refute the ancient prophecy. In the plain of the 4 branches, the blood will run so deep it will reach the belly of an elephant. Of the Khmer people, there will remain no more than a handful of men living in the shade of a banyan tree. The Khmer Rouge used the past glory of Cambodia as an excuse for their bloodthirsty dictatorship. But you can't turn back the clock of history. 1,000 years have gone by since the golden age of the Khmer Empire, and all the gilt and glitter of the present-day palaces cannot overshadow the splendor of the temples of Angkor. The Cambodians are proud of their country, but they have no nostalgic yearning for their long-gone power. Now they're looking forward, towards the future, and want to make up for the lost years. And they're hoping to achieve the same standard of living as their neighbors, the Thais. The first part of our Khmer cruise comes to an end here at Phnom Penh. The next stage of our voyage will take us through Vietnam to discover the southern provinces of the ancient Khmer Empire, the Mekong Delta, and Saigon.